Okay, welcome. This is one of my first videos I've made about apologetics, and I wanted to go over this. So this is a front and back piece of paper that is provided by crossexamined.org. And I wanted to briefly go over it and see what I think about all these things. First, at a glance, this shows me, design is my passion. Why are there titles on the bottom? Especially like this title here and this title here that are separated from their thing afterwards. It bugs me. But this goes over Frank Turek's main 4 big questions that he likes to ask. Mainly the truth question. Come on, pen. I want you to work for me here. Yeah, there we go. We have our truth question, our God question, our miracles question, and is the New Testament true? Each of these are important in their own different ways. It doesn't work if I don't have that button open. That is bad design. Whatever. But the RR tactic, the Roadrunner tactic. When people make claims that are contrary to Christianity, you can often detect flaws in those claims by using the Roadrunner tactic. The Roadrunner tactic shows that many claims against Christianity are logically self-defeating. It turns a claim on itself to see if the claim meets its own standard. For example, if someone says there is no truth, then you can turn the claim on itself by asking, is that true? This is a very interesting question, because it kind of changes, it uses 2 definitions of truth. Because I have been, in my head, I've been describing there's 2 kinds of truth. There's lowercase truth and capital T truth, is how I've described it to myself. So basically, this is a lowercase t truth, and this is an uppercase T truth. Basically, the change is, it's actually it being subjective or not. Because basically, if you put all decisions that were made by every person ever, you could probably graph that out and go, oh, these were the best. These were the best things that ever happened to anyone ever. And basically, there is a thing that is capital T truth, but the problem is this truth is really hard to tell the difference between this truth and this truth. Such as, like when you look at the sky and so one person says, oh, it's blue, and the other just goes, oh, it's kind of gray. Like, you both can be looking at the same sky, but, like, it is true that the sky has a color, but the lowercase true is what we perceive as the capital T. But yeah, notice that the claim doesn't meet its own standard. There is no truth is actually a truth claim. It isn't a truth claim. It claims to be true that there is no truth. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. That's a really funny statement. I'll get there in a second. It violates the law of non-contradiction, so it can't be true. Law of non-contradiction is, very simply, A is not equal, or it is A is not equal to not A. Or technically it's P, because we talk about propositions, but whatever. But it's the I can't speak a word in English. What's one of the first things you learn when you speak a new language? It's sorry, I don't know how to speak any of this language. No habla español. That is a true statement. I don't know Spanish. I know that that means I don't know Spanish. That doesn't really... It's... Technically, it's a contradiction, I guess. But if an actual Spanish person came up to me and said, no habla español, in their accent, I wouldn't understand it right away. It would take me a second. So... No, I can't speak a word in English. Not really a contradiction. It's making it clear that you don't understand the language. Whatever. Some say all truth is relative. Is that a relative truth? Ooh, spooky. Refer back to capital and lowercase truth. Because no, it is not an absolute truth. No fact. In fact, there is no relative truths. All truth is absolute. Some might say, I feel warm right now, but people in Alaska feel cold. That is a relative truth. No, it is not. I don't like this example. It is just silly. Because I don't care if people in Alaska feel cold. I feel warm right now. I don't know anyone who would use this, way to prove if there are relative truths. Because the frame between someone in Alaska and where I am at is very different. But I do agree with the conclusion to his question, at least, it is true for you, it is true for all people that right now I feel warm. Because my lowercase truth is a capital T truth for all... Yeah. It is a capital T truth that I have a lowercase t truth. Some say all truth comes from science. Does that truth come from science? I've read parts of this, but it's like, no, it's not. The claim is self-defeating because there is not a scientific truth, it's a philosophical claim. Philosophy is a branch of science. Or science is a branch of philosophy, one or the other. You can't really have one without the other. You can't prove the rules of science or the tools of science, such as the laws of logic, the law of causality, and the reliability of observation. Because they are all sort of lowercase t truths. There's basis on laws of logic in the law of non-contradiction that makes them capital T. That's where you start building your axioms. Such as to claim the law of non-contradiction is false, you would then have to clarify that there is a difference between the law of contradiction being true and the law of non-contradiction being false, therefore implying that P is not equal to not P. But so like you can prove laws of logic. And the law of causality is just saying that things happen in time. A causes B, and A is always come before or at the same time as B. There's not really anything that breaks that, unless there's some weird things with, like, black holes. Or, like, fusion that can somehow make more energy than you put in. But I'm not really that big of a science guy outside of that. And the reliability of observation, that's the whole point of the scientific method. humans are really bad at making judgment calls on things. The biggest one I can explain about, like, our human brains being awful, we mentally do not understand exponentials. Like, it's really hard for us to, like, comprehend just how fast exponentials move. I can't think of a thing right off the top of my head, but this is an interesting thing to look into. Because often we'll get, like, a linear thing mixed up with a compound thing. And lots of scams happen because of it, actually. But moreover, the data one gets from science needs to be interpreted. Sort of, like, it's interpreted, but it's interpreted by a lot of people, and it's tested. That's the biggest thing, is that they're tested. Tested. Nothing in science is like one person says this is what happened. And yeah, this is what happened, and we believe this is to be true off of one study. Everything needs to be tested multiple times and proven. Even the Shroud of Turin has been tested by multiple scientists in multiple labs. If scientists' philosophy rule out intellect causes before they took out the evidence, is it any wonder why they always interpret the data to arrive at a natural cause? Because natural causes are the only thing that science can test for. I'm not even saying that there is no supernatural causes, but if there was, you would have to rule out all other natural causes, because natural causes are the only thing that science really can test for. But even then, if it's testable and repeatable, then you can use science for it. What most important question? This is the most important question. You can ask someone who isn't a Christian. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? If the person hesitates or answers no, you probably won't make much progress offering evidence. That person doesn't want Christianity to be true, so no amount of evidence will convince him or her. You could also just use the word them. That is a accurate way to use that word. But basically, the thing is, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I know people who would say no, and they say no for really good reasons. If Christianity were true, I wouldn't be an atheist, because there would be proof that Christianity is true, and there'd be proof that there is a God. The thing that makes you a Christian is if you accept this dude here, which is white Jesus, as your savior, then you get to go to heaven. But the problem with that is all of the morally reprehensible things that God does in the Old Testament, and things in the New Testament, like in Jude, I believe, basically saying that Jesus is the one who killed everyone in the Old Testament, because he's God too. So there's a real reason that people would say no. The hesitation comes from people being agnostic to it. There are people who think a God exists and is trying to figure out if it is the Christian one. Which I personally hold to the belief that either there is no gods or there is a million gods. And they're all fighting over the world, because that would explain the chaos that we see all over the place. But okay, does God exist? Because P or not P? God either exists or he doesn't exist. Let's look at 3 of the many arguments for the existence of God. Let's see if I hear a new one that's never been shown before. We know that God, by his effects, we see effects such as the universe. The universe does exist. Design or objective morality. Okay. We reason back to a cause. 3 major effects of God are the beginning of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe, and the design of life, and the existence of objective moral values and obligations. We'll go over each of the 3 here. The cosmological argument states, the scientific evidence shows that space and time and matter exploded into being out of literal nothing. No. The impossibility of an infinite, regardless of time, yeah. What in the world is this design? Okay. The impossibility of an infinite, infinite regress of time shows that time had a beginning. If there were an infinite number of days before today, then today would have never gotten here. Since today is here, there is only a finite number of days before today, in which means time had a beginning. Okay, so our propositions are there's an infinite number of days before today. Agreed. Then today would have never gotten here. That's a conclusion off of one proposition. Since today is here, there were only a finite number of days before today. Sort of, which means time had a beginning. Sort of. So, this depends on your cosmological take on things. It depends on if you believe in, like, big bangs and big crunches and whatever. But basically, does it mention, the rapid expansion? Since space, time, and matter had a beginning, then a cause must be something beyond time, space, and matter. Oh, this is the proof for God in here. Okay, I'll get to that in a sec. But basically, science does not show that space, time, and matter exploded out of nothing. I can't remember when it was, but there was a recent study of physicists that, like, looked in, they were pulled to see what does the Big Bang actually show. Oh, sorry. The rapid expansion. Big Bang gets some people worked up. Oh, I said it again. The rapid expansion. The rapid expansion more shows that at one point there was a singularity because the math breaks down. We currently don't know what happens then. But there is no reason to believe that energy never existed in the universe. Because the other thing, if you look at our E equals mc squared, it is a oversimplification, but basically, if you have energy, it will equal your mass and your speed. So, if you have energy, there is a way, if you have enough energy, you start making mass. Which is crazy to think about. Because even, I'm not the best at it, but even if you think of your electricity is a bunch of electrons that exist. So theoretically, if you just gather like a ball of electrons, eventually you will have enough electrons to see. Because they take up space. Energy isn't invisible. Energy does take up space. So there is no reason to believe there ever was nothing. The other one, this is actually like the thing that snapped me out of religion, is watching Frank Turek speak. If I find the picture, I'll put it up here. But basically, if there was an infinite number of days before today, then today would have never gotten here. Wrong. This was solved in, like, Greece. This is just Achilles and the tortoise. It just is. It's Achilles and the tortoise is about this problem. Achilles and the tortoise states, if there's a Achilles, which is a dude who's really fast at running, and then we got our tortoise, who Achilles is like, okay, you get a head start. So the turtle gets, like, let's be reasonable. He gets a day head start. So, Achilles leaves after a day. By the time Achilles reaches halfway, the tortoise would have moved forward a bit. And then, same thing is by the time Achilles moves a little bit farther, the tortoise would have moved a little bit farther. But the problem is, if by the time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise is at, the tortoise would have moved forward. And so far, ad infinitum. This argument wasn't made to say, oh, we can't have this thing, makes no sense. It's because they didn't understand infinites yet. And apparently there's some people who don't anymore. You can prove right now that you can collapse infinites by clapping. It's because to clap, you must first move your hands halfway that distance, and then halfway that distance, then halfway that distance at infinite, and eventually all of those infinite halves meet together at a point. And in the case of Achilles and the tortoise, they move past each other. This makes no sense. Because there could be an infinite number of days before today, and there would still be a today. Because we had an infinite number of days before today. Because personally, I'm not a physicist, but if I understand the rapid expansion, technically all the rapid expansion has is our current understanding of time and space, because that's what our reference point is. There's no reason to believe there wasn't this ball of energy that expanded a little bit, contracted, expanded a little bit until it hit the right cycle to then make this universe. And who knows how long the universe did that before the world began. But the teleological argument. Several physical aspects of the universe, such as expansion rate, gravitational force, the electromagnetic force, are highly fine-tuned for life to exist here on Earth. This gravitational force, I remember when I learned this in physics class, is actually just fascinating. No! What happened to my turtle? There we go, turtle, you got this. But, okay. This gravitational force, there's things in the universe that are just constants. and we don't know why, other than they exist. So, like, gravity, if I remember right, is calculated something like you got, it's, you got mass 1 times mass 2 times the gravitational constant. Like, there's some constant. On Earth, this is like 9.81, if I remember correctly. Meters per second squared. Basically, because they took a bunch of things, compared them to other things, and they did a bunch of division, they derived this constant that just exists. If there's only one of them were different by even an infinitesimal amount, life would not exist. In other words, the rapid expansion was not a scattered explosion of pre-existing material, but a highly finely tuned guided creation event that continues to be guided to this day. You misunderstand how infinite works. If there is an infinite amount of time, literally anything that is possible can happen. Monkeys and typewriters. Who knows? But the other thing I know about these constants is there's not much evidence to say they could be different. Because there's not, because we see them and they've been tested and they've been measured so many different times constantly. This K is recalculated yearly by high school students. Like, you could calculate this yourself. This 9.81, drop a thing, measure it, see how long it takes to fall. People use this to measure the distance of, like, the depth of wells, because it's that consistent. And then you can use that to then calculate the force of gravity. You can calculate the circumference of the Earth by, like, shooting a laser beam. Like, these things get tested over and over again. If there was fine-tuning, or if there was a god, it would make more sense that these things wouldn't be fine-tuned and they would work anyway. The moral argument. Design is my passion. Like, switch these. Move them around. Can I just, like, only have so many things on the screen before they start going away when I'm using Control-Z? I don't know. This thing makes no sense. But, okay. If there is one action that is objectively morally wrong, such as torturing babies for fun, or murdering 6 million people in the Holocaust, then God exists. Why? Because only an unchanging moral being, whose nature is the standard of goodness, can provide unchanging moral laws and obligations that are binding on human beings. Without the objective standard, known as God's nature, everything would just be a matter of human opinion. Hitler, Stalin, child murderers, pedophiles, rapists, cannibals, etc. would not be morally any different than Mother Teresa. Okay. Well, clearly you've not heard of this guy named Gandhi. He, like, launched nukes on everyone. But he was pretty much a pacifist. Look up Gandhi nukes. Sorry. But why? That, like, let's just think this through. So morally, is there something that everyone can agree on? The fact that there is a Holocaust, to me, proves that morals are subjective. Because how were there people who thought that it would be the right thing to do? Like, and the other thing that I often hear, which kind of makes sense to me, is even if morals are grounded in God's nature, that means God has no control over what is moral. God just is good, which means murdering babies for fun is moral. Psalms, I think it's like somewhere like Psalms 30-ish, and it goes, happy the ones who bashed the babies against the rocks. Ridiculous. Like, there are morally reprehensible things decreed in the Bible. You often hear something along the lines of the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not murder. And they go, oh, that's such a great thing, it tells you not to kill people. It doesn't tell you not to kill people. It tells you not to murder them. Murder is wrong. That is what is called a tautology. Tautologies are always true. Because tautologies are always true. No. Tautologies are true because tautologies are true. Now, that's a circular statement. Tautologies are true because tautologies are always true? I can't remember. I'm trying to think of a joke. I'll have to think of it better. But basically, murder is wrong because murder is defined as unjust killing. You can't have a married bachelor because a bachelor, by definition, is an unmarried person. Murder is wrong, absolutely, because the laws were set to determine what is the wrong way to kill people. It's so we can judge these people by, in my opinion, one of the things in the Bible, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. Which, even that can be some problems because there's some people who really don't love themselves. And that would mean that it is just for them to do awful things because they would want awful things done to themselves. But that would be morally okay. So it's more, as a society, we have to decide what we want to better this thing that we have going. By our understanding, we are the most successful animals in the entire universe. Because we don't see them anywhere else. We might be the first. Like, if this universe goes on forever, I hope we make it to the stars. Because if we make it to the stars, that means we'll be sharing this crazy thing we call life with the universe. Because as we see now, there's no reason to believe that there is other life in the universe like us. At least none that can communicate with us. The fact that we can think and go, huh, I wonder if I exist. That's kinda special. I can play video games. That's weird. But okay. I'm only on 2 of 3. Let's go to number 3. Because now, Frank Turek normally breaks this up. 1 and 2 are more of these basis of his argument of if truth exists, because the rest of these determine, like, is the New Testament true? That is what they're trying to figure out. Are miracles true? And then his other question of God needs to exist. What is this box here? Whoa. Fancy. But basically, he has his question here of if God exists, then there is a God to do miracles. If God exists, there is miracles that can happen that tells us about the New Testament. That's his main argument here. But okay, are miracles possible? The evidence for the greatest miracle. What is the greatest miracle in the Bible? The greatest miracle in the beginning was the very first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If the verse is true, then every other miracle in the Bible is certainly possible. Even atheists admit the data for the greatest miracle that the universe had a beginning. Not entirely. You're talking about non-theists, not atheists. There are atheists that can believe in weird things, like last Thursdayism, which I even hold to a point. Last Thursdayism is basically states, prove to me that life in the universe didn't start last Thursday exactly as it is. As in, the world was just begun and pushed from this moment. And there's not much evidence that can disprove it because all of the dinosaur bones were already buried under the ground. What proves that they weren't just put there? But, like, that would prove that the universe, I guess, had a beginning, but not where anyone thinks it was. But also, I don't think the universe had a beginning. But if God exists, then miracles are possible. The God that created natural laws can certainly overpower them. In fact, natural laws are just the descriptions of what normally happens when no one intervenes. But if an outside agent intervenes, the natural laws can be overpowered. Gravity will keep a rock on the ground unless an agent intervenes and picks it up. This makes sense. But there's also reason to believe that there was a lot of theists that believed God was a clockmaker. God set this world into motion as it was, and hasn't intervened since because there's no reason for him to. Outside of, like, everything past Jesus, I guess. Which, the other thing you can look at to follow the statistic is the number of miracles have dropped down greatly since the advent of cameras. The fact that we can now take pictures of things and videos of things, miracles don't happen as much anymore. Do miracles happen today? Atheists say no, but how do they know that? Does that mean that miracles couldn't happen in the past? We're living in a miracle right now. The universe is a grand miracle. The scientific and philosophical evidence points to the fact that the universe was created out of nothing. You say it there again. That's so much wasted space on this pamphlet that's trying to, like, help people prove that God exists. But even if there haven't been any miracles since Jesus and the apostles, Christianity is still true. It doesn't depend on any modern-day miracles. The central purpose of miracles in the Bible is to confirm that someone who says that they have new revelation is really getting it from God. The miracle confirms the message, and the signs confirm the sermon. Since God is not proving us with new revelation today, there may be no reason for miracles today. But there are people having revelations today. Just yesterday I saw a dude who was claiming to be the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. And he has evidence. He has signs from God from it. He has like a cult of like 10 or 20 or more people that follow him. Also has parody songs. It was a fun rabbit hole to go down. But like, the purpose of miracles today would be to confirm that the Bible is true. The greatest miracle that I'd love to be solved is the problem of divine hiddenness. If God just showed himself to everyone and said, oh, you can choose to like take the free gift if you want or not, or just enjoy this life. Because truthfully, if you want a good example of that sort of thing, is like go watch like the end of The Good Place. Or immortality seems like an awful thing. Immortality will be really great until there's nothing left to do. Such as Super Bowl, the Super Bowl fanfic that's like super far in the future, where all the humans live forever and have done everything known to man. Like, if you prove to us that God exists, then absolutely. I'd be interested in infinity, but I wouldn't want infinity to last forever. But okay. There may be no need for miracles today, of course. God can do a miracle anytime he wants, but the central purpose for miracles may have passed along with the closing of the canon. I don't think the canon would be closed. Because if anything were in the revelation, and that means there's new parts of the canon that are being added to all the time. It's just we don't have them in the book. And even if miracles do occur today, you shouldn't expect to see many of them. Why? Because miracles must be rare to get our attention. If resurrections, for example, occurred all the time, then Christ's resurrection would mean nothing to us and wouldn't confirm the unique essential claim that of Jesus is God. Why is there a break here? Who designed this? Is that like the first one here? No, there's a couple of them. Like, you had space. Whatever. What does this say again? But if miracles occur today, like, I understand. Absolutely. Miracles need to be rare in order to mean anything. But that doesn't mean there shouldn't be any miracles. Miracles are rare in the Bible. In fact, that in the Bible, miracles are relatively rare. There are approximately 250 in the miracles in the Bible. From Abraham to the apostles is about 2,000 years. If we were to spread out all those miracles evenly, there would be one about every 8 years, and even less frequent for miracles done before crowds. Of course, miracles did not occur every 8 years. They occur in bunches. The main point is that miracles are still rare even in the Bible. Most events in the Bible were natural, regular events like they are today, which enabled miracles to stand out when they occurred. But this 8 years point is a weird thing to point out. I'd like to know what the distribution is. Not stated here, but even so, you do the math. if the last miracle happened was Jesus' resurrection 2,000 years ago, we should have had about 250 miracles happen past then. And I can name of, like, one that people held to, which was, like, the Mary statue crying, but I think there was even some evidence against that of, like, moisture building up inside the statue because it was in a weird, shady and sunny spot. But where are the 250 miracles that happened in modern day? Like, God isn't consistently trying to give people things to prove. And the other thing, not even to mention, is why did most of these miracles only happen to his chosen people? Why not try to prove it to other people, especially if now that Gentiles can join in? But, okay. Historical truth. Is this... I'd have to count words, but it feels like these are shorter. But, okay. Is the New Testament historically reliable? There are several reasons for believing that the New Testament writers told the truth. The documents were written early by eyewitnesses who included embarrassing details that they would have never invented. There were also evidence from archaeology where non-Christian writers collaborate their claims. Okay. First-hand accounts. I'll keep reading. Where did I... Eyewitnesses. Okay. We got our Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. John, I'm trying to remember all of their stories. Like, Matthew and Mark were... Matthew was an apostle. Matthew walked around with the dude. Mark is his brother, who didn't become a part of the story until after his death. Luke never met Jesus. And I can't remember which John the book of John is named after, but if it's like John the Baptist wrote it, he was before Jesus and he's barely in the story. And if it's John the Apostle, I can't actually remember which John this is, so I don't know for sure. But even just out of these three, Mark wasn't there for the whole thing. Matthew was there, and Luke wasn't there. Luke got all of his stuff from Paul and from collecting other books from around the time, apparently. But okay. However, Christianity would be true if the New Testament was never written. How so? Because Christianity did not originate with a book. Christianity originated with an event, the resurrection of Jesus. Well, we wouldn't know much about Christianity if the reports of the resurrection had never been written. The resurrection precedes the reports. There were thousands of Christians before the line of the New Testament was ever written. Indeed, Paul became a Christian before he wrote a word of the New Testament. He also became a Christian because God spoke to him. So did Matthew, John, James, Peter, etc. Why? Because they had... Why? Not because they had read it in a book, but because they had witnessed the resurrected Jesus. The only thing to change this about is have to conquer the mythicists. There's been lots of evidence about if Jesus was even a real person. I don't hold to that claim because I find it not useful to hold to that claim. And these people had no motive to make the story up. In fact, they had every motive to say it wasn't true. All the New Testament writers, except Luke, were observant Jews who could dearly proclaim the resurrection. Why would people who thought they were God's chosen people invent a resurrection story that would get them excommunicated from the chosen people, and then be beaten and tortured and murdered? The answer, they wouldn't. They were believers in Yahweh, who never expected a resurrection Messiah. Yet they proclaimed it, altered their lives and religion because of it. And they wrote about it despite the fact that doing any of that would likely get them killed. Well, one, all the Gospels were anonymously written. I mentioned these. We don't know who wrote those books. They don't start the book saying, I am Matthew and I wrote this story. It's a lot of it has been inferred from other people. Like, inferred by, like, saying the beloved disciple. But also doesn't use a word of I anywhere, and it's mostly using, like, the royal we. Could that be evidence of them, like, trying to hide their evidence of them not being killed? But again, wouldn't them being killed prove their point? Or killing them get them sent to heaven? Like, there was no fear of death for them. Why would they need to be feared for their lives? The other, that was the big thing, is like, we don't have reason to know who wrote each of these books. Some people point out apparent contradictions and differences in the Gospels, which supposedly invalidate them as reliable historical sources for the life of Jesus. In reality, however, these supposed contradictions actually dyslexia, whatever, actually indicate authentically as genuine eyewitnesses would record slightly differing accounts of the same events. Genuine eyewitnesses of any event usually agree on the central facts of the story and diverge over the details. All of the New Testament writers agree on the central fact that Jesus rose from the dead, but they didn't collude to smooth out every detail. So even if one could find real contradictions in the details, that wouldn't mean Christianity is false. Indeed, if Jesus rose from the dead, then Christianity is true. Was there one or two guards at the tomb of Jesus on his resurrection? Did the veil get torn before or after? I can't remember. There's even contradictions in the resurrection story. Jesus wasn't supposed to speak. He was supposed to be led like a lamb to the slaughter. But then he goes off to the corner and talks with Pilate? There's parts of it that just make no sense. The other one that, also struck me a bit, not in the New Testament, because part of if the New Testament is reliable, is the Old Testament reliable? These dudes believed in the Old Testament. It's important. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. No, he created man first. Look at the order of differences between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. Genesis 1, you have created the heavens and earth. So you created the heavens, earth, light, then earth, then it's the creeping, all the things that creep and crawl on the earth, and then you created man. And in Genesis 2, it's a very different account. He created man, and then he created the world as the garden to put the man in. And then he created man, he created the world to put man on, gave it plants in the garden, and then he created he was trying to find a helper for Adam. And this helper, he did so by creating all the animals, and then Adam named all the animals as he was searching for this helper, but could not find any. So he created man and then the animals. Very different creation account. There's parts of it that just make no sense. And I mostly left because there was too many. They started adding up too much. If the answer is yes to these 4 questions, then we have good reason to believe that the entire Bible is true. The entire Bible being true? What do you mean by the entire? Because, there's reason to think the Genesis story is whack. There's reason to believe that the things in Revelation haven't happened yet. There's reasons to believe that Jesus didn't fulfill messianic prophecies. I watch Cross-Examined because I want to keep this idea in my head and proof that this God idea is weird. As I'm trying to find my way in it, mostly my way out of this religion and deconstructing it. They make it really easy to deconstruct because they say the same 4 points. Was the answer yes to all of these? Yes, truth does exist. Does God exist? I don't see any reason for him to. Possible, so I'll grant a yes. Are miracles possible? If there's a God, then probably. But who said that gods needed to do miracles? And why are miracles needed in the first place for this thing? And is the New Testament historically reliable? Not really. Read the book of Acts. This dude just runs around all of the Mediterranean and almost dies so many different times and just gets up and keeps moving. There's other parts that are some of the Jesus story. There's other parts. The other thing that I remember seeing in here that I had a contention with yeah. Contradictions in wow, this format is just bad. For drawing on things, whatever. Some people will point out contradictions. I agreed. Eyewitnesses would record things very differently. The problem is they agree too much. And also the things that they say some of the things they say from this Jesus figure contradict the things he said. Is it wrong to divorce your wife? The answer is no, if you look in one of them. But the answer is no, but yes in another one. One of them says it's morally reprehensible except in the cases of immorality. The other one just says no, it's wrong in all cases. Those are 2 very different things. And those are words from Jesus, supposedly. this book's ridiculous. And I've not read this book more than once I became an atheist. Because I want to know what people get out of this book, so I'm not caught blindsided by people saying things like this to warrant the atrocities that this religion has brought people. If God is good, why did the Holocaust happen? Why did the Crusades happen? Like, that's another thing you mention up here, is the Crusades happened by supposed Christians. The reasons the Crusades happened was because the Catholic Church said, if you die in the Crusade, you get a one-way ticket to heaven. We'll pay all of your time in purgatory. My other weird little thought on purgatory is I saw a video the other day that basically said something along the lines of, hell proves that God's at least immoral. I don't think Hitler deserves hell. At least an infinite hell. Like, could he atone for what he did and become a better person? Maybe. How long would it take? 1 million years? 2 million years? 1 billion years? 1 trillion years? And eventually you hit maybe 7 trillion years. Then he would pay enough. Like, that would be more moral. Like, to atone for all people. To believe in the Jesus figure is to believe in eternal torment for people who try as hard as they can to believe this thing. And trust me, I've tried. I read this thing hoping that it would give me some semblance of Christianity, and it hasn't. Well, thank you for watching. I'm Ven. I'm going to have to cut this into pieces. I've been rambling for an hour, and my mic has been peaking because I'm bad at recording. Well, thank you for today. Never had a bad day.